Hello and welcome to the very first video from It's Not Just Graphics. We were very excited about the announcement of Game Boy Advance games coming to Virtual Console, and so we decided to show off what is possibly our favourite Game Boy Advance game, and that is Metroid Fusion. Metroid Fusion, if you're not familiar with it, was originally released on the Game Boy Advance in 2002. It was developed as well by Nintendo Research and Development 1. They were the same team who did Super Metroid on the SNES, which is often cited as many people's favourite in the series. So yeah, let's now take a quick look at Metroid Fusion. One of the first things that came across when we first played Metroid Fusion was the story of the game. It's actually quite a good one. Now, stories aren't the most important things when playing games. They help to create an air of tension and just make things a bit more fun, rather than just interacting with some flashing lights and bouncing about. The story of Metroid Fusion is sort of a mixture between Alien and Day of the Triffids. There's this parasite called Parasite X that gets inside of Samus and sort of infects her, and she has to be operated on. As a result, she's lost a lot of her special powers, and in typical Metroid fashion then has to go around collecting all of her old bits of suits and equipment to give her all of her abilities back, which help her to access new areas. As you can see in the cutscene here, right at the very intro, it's sort of mixing in-game graphics and also these beautifully rendered scenes. This really is a very, very pretty game as well. It really does push the capabilities of the Game Boy Advance. As you can see, Metroid Fusion is a really, really, really beautiful game, and that brings us very neatly to my next point. However, before I move on, I will just let you finish gawking at this absolutely wonderful introduction. As I just mentioned previously, one of the other great things about the game as well is its graphics. It does a really, really good job in combining a load of different areas and makes, even though everything's set within the same space station, it manages to make everything unique. As you can see here in the data room, that all the machines that Samus interacts with sort of gets data and everything uploaded onto sort of reacts around her, so that machine there in the data room sort of enclosed in around here. As you can see from this clip as well, there's these really, really quite pretty jungle environments with all of the vines and the creepers hanging down. It sort of looks a bit more Aztec than an asteroid space station off somewhere, but that's described in the story as that these are all areas that are sort of set up to try and act as different environments to keep different creatures alive. So it's not quite as weird as it originally looks. As you can see on this clip as well, sometimes the lights get switched off in a very spooky fashion. As a 2D exploratory platformer, that doesn't have quite the same effect as maybe being in a first-person shooter might do, where you can just turn on a torch or anything. So here we can see a lighting effect has been used to put Samus in a sort of 1960s Batman-style spotlight and have her running around. You will be watching this on a laptop screen or a computer screen, which is quite well backlit. On the original Game Boy, the screen was so dim that it made things very difficult to see indeed. You can see here, like, looking out the window, you can actually see spaces out of there, and it's all just scrolling along in the background. There's a part in the game where you go into a laboratory, and there's these little creatures here. Look at these little guys just hanging out, and they're interacting with you and sort of bouncing at the window trying to get your attention and swinging off a tyre rope. There's just an incredible level of detail in the game's graphics, and I think what makes Metroid so special, rather than try and push the technology of the Game Boy Advance in order to make sort of a first-person shooter or something like that, like so many other studios did. Research and Development 1, they were sort of like, well, we finally got the technology to make a really, really beautiful 2D game, and that's what they did, rather than trying just to make a 3D shooter which would just fade into the back of memory. Yeah, okay, it's a first-person shooter, but it still kind of looks a bit naff. sorry Doom. Whereas the graphics for Metroid won't age much at all. I mean, there are indie games out there being made right now where these visuals are trying to be emulated, so these graphics in a way are timeless. Now, the other area where the game really excels is, I mentioned it as well before, with the way the story is used and the way the graphics are used, is to just create this huge amount of tension. Metroid Fusion really is one of the great sort of sci-fi horror games. It's obviously not as scary as some of the other games like Dead Space. You're not having to tear limbs off and fight for your survival, and there's not demonic babies jumping at your face, but there are great moments like this one here where you've got 6 minutes to try and turn off the boiler room because the whole space station is going to blow up. So you're running around, all the warning lights are flashing, the music has gotten to a really tense space. You've got all of these, you've kind of got an idea as to where you need to go. There's all of these blocks in the way, the enemies bouncing at your face, so you're trying to do a speed run but without taking too much damage, because in typical Metroid form you're probably very aware that there's going to be some very nasty monster waiting for you at the end of the path. So not only are you trying to quickly rush there as fast as possible, but you don't want to take too much damage. And the other thing as well that you may have noticed is the sound is absolutely fantastic in this section, because you can actually hear someone's computer voice coming over going, "Warning, only 5 minutes remaining." You don't usually get that in Game Boy Advance games. Not enough memory on the cartridge to allow for voiceovers. So hearing that was, wow, I really ought to get a bit of a wriggle on. So we really hope you have enjoyed the video and you're as excited as we are now for Metroid Fusion on the Game Boy Advance Virtual Console coming for Wii U. And if you want to see more of our ramblings or hear more of our musings, then you can check out our website. It's notjustgraphics.com, or we even have a Twitter account, so you can see some of our more banal thoughts being pumped out there. So check us out at It's Not Just Graphics.